Um, hello. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I think I know most everyone in the chat. See a lot of familiar names, familiar faces. But for those of you who do not know me, I am Anna Everett, and I am an instructional designer in the Office of Online Learning here at Nashville State. Um, and what I want to talk to you about today is how you can promote student engagement and interaction by integrating a collaborative element in your online courses, be that like group work or group projects, or just anything that gets students talking together and working together on some kind of shared endeavor. So when I say online, I do mean mainly online courses. So courses that are designated as online at Nashville State. That's courses that are asynchronous, that do not have Zoom meetings or in-person meetings. Just because I think designing a group project or a collaborative activity in those courses can be especially challenging because you don't have students meeting face to face. You don't have Zoom meetings where you can separate them out into breakout rooms and give them a space to discuss face to face. Students are working at a lot of, we talk about how students have very busy lives, they have different schedules, so it can be kind of hard to coordinate something that actually gets students working together in an online course. So there's some special considerations to take into account if you're wanting to attempt something like this. And so we're just going to go over some ways that you might be able to do that and some strategies for making sure that it is effective for your students. So that's exactly what I'm going to go over. First, the what our challenges are as far as organizing collaborative activities and group projects in online courses, and what are some of our opportunities. If you were in my session yesterday, I talked a lot about promoting community and interaction between students in online courses. And so we're going to kind of continue on with that, thinking about how you can use group work to promote that kind of interaction and social element of online learning. And we're going to talk about the why. So of course, organizing a group project in an online course is especially challenging since we don't have those face-to-face meetings or Zoom meetings. It's important to address, what are the potential benefits? What's kind of the trade-off between dealing with the amount of work that an instructor has to put into organizing a group project online versus the potential benefits that you and your students might reap from them. And then finally, the how, with a special attention to the tool that we have at our disposal in D2L. That's the groups tool. That's the main tool that we have that instructors can use to facilitate online group projects and group discussions. And it's a tool that isn't often used. So I wanted to take a part of this session to just talk about that tool in particular and how to use it in case you're not familiar with it. I don't know of a lot of instructors that use it. So it's just something else that you can add to your D2L toolkit. Before we get started, though, I love to start off with just getting a sense of your own experience in the audience. Because you all are in the classroom, you all are teaching these courses, and so you're familiar with the practicalities of trying to organize group projects, be that in person or online. So specifically thinking about online, have any of you assigned collaborative or group work for online? Have you used the group tools in D2L? And how did it go? Okay, so we got some answers. Gracie, unfortunately, it was a disaster. I'm sure not solely because of your technological ignorance. And we could talk about some, technological tips and strategies that, that might help, with making sure that, group work is effective and that it is productive for students. I'd love to hear more about that, Gracie, if you'd like to share about, what exactly went wrong. And feel free to chime in when we start talking about the groups tool, if that's specifically where things maybe got off track. In class, yes. Online, no. Yeah, it's easier to do in class. It's easier to do on Zoom. Online, very challenging. In person, yes. Not online. Not use the group function online. I've not. Nope. I've tried groups. The tool is very frustrated. Yeah, it can be kind of difficult to work with. I'll admit that. Zoom-based classes, but not online. Never had a positive experience with online group work. It's a little difficult to manage using it, but still don't know what the student sees and how they access everything. So I guess I'm not sure how to set it up. We'll look at the student view of using the group tool, because I think that's really important for, actually making sure, that the settings that the students are seeing actually make sense. So we'll switch back and forth between teacher and student view. And feel free to chime in, Karen. I know you've used the group tool, so if there's anything in particular you want to talk about, just let me know. It's very difficult even in person. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a ton of work to organize a group project because you as the instructor have to, really be ready to intervene and to, be kind of an active facilitator of that, especially when things go wrong, as they sometimes do. David Girth used groups. We did group case analyses, used group discussions. Frankly, earlier I used a wiki I paid for myself. Very interesting. The wiki was better. I didn't know if it was accessible. Wish D2L had a wiki. Yeah, yeah. I think that would be great. And I would love to hear more about that project that you did, because that sounds really interesting. And that's one potential place that I think it could be really productive to do a group project, have students work together to create a wiki on a particular topic. What's a wiki? Well, think of the wiki that we're most familiar with is Wikipedia. So it's essentially a collaborative resource that multiple people work together to create. So it's kind of a living document that multiple people can edit and add to. So that's why it works pretty well with group projects, is because you can have multiple students actively kind of creating knowledge and collaborating together to create a resource that others can use. Again, case-based groups takes a lot of work and communication with students. Absolutely. Google Doc. Yeah, Google Docs are great. Especially, for kind of giving students a special space where they can work together. And D2L doesn't really have a great analog for Google Docs. SharePoint also doesn't. I'll talk about this later, but SharePoint also has some drawbacks. So Google Docs are great. Great. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I think it sounds like, most of you have confirmed what I already suspected, is that a lot of online instructors don't use group work or don't use collaborative activities, just because it's already hard enough to do that in person. And with online, it's really challenging because you don't kind of have that scheduled meeting time where students are all together and where you can, directly supervise what is happening. So there are definitely some significant challenges when it comes to thinking about how you might strategize integrating that collaborative component. Oh, very interesting, David. Sorry, this is a sidetrack, but the name Wiki comes from the Wiki buses that used to be found at the Honolulu airport. Today you learned. Very interesting. Okay, so let's talk about, we've already addressed this a bit in the chat, and I've already alluded to this a little bit, but what is the challenge here? And where do we maybe have some opportunities to innovate, or maybe do more in terms of thinking about how we can make online courses a bit more collaborative, get a little bit more student-to-student interaction involved? If you were in my talk yesterday when I was talking about promoting community and promoting interaction in online courses, I already talked about how we have a significant social challenge with online courses. In-person courses are kind of inherently social. Students have to show up. They're present with their classmates physically in person. Face-to-face conversations are happening. There's spontaneous interaction, and you as the instructor are also physically present. So you can more kind of actively facilitate. And naturally, there's going to be more opportunities for collaborative learning in person, because they're there, they're physically present with their classmates, and there's just kind of there's already a kind of pre-designated space and time for that kind of collaboration to happen. Online, you don't have that kind of same spontaneity or that same kind of connection with between students and between classmates. Any interaction is going to be mostly pretty highly structured. It's mostly probably going to happen in the discussion boards, which are kind of already highly structured. Um, Online learning is mostly solitary. There are fewer opportunities for connection with one's fellow classmates because you're physically separated. Something that some students feel can lead to a sense of disconnection or isolation. So there's also fewer opportunities for collaborative learning and just active real-time discussion. We also have, just group projects. We already talked about this a little bit, but group projects are just difficult to do, even in person. They're much easier to do, when you're in the classroom, because any interaction in the classroom is happening in real time, happening in a dedicated space. The instructor is actively there to supervise what's going on, and groups have greater social pressure and accountability. If you have to show up to class and face your classmates that you've been slacking off, if you've been slacking off in your group project, it's a lot harder to do that. There's a pretty strong social pressure, to stay in contact with your classmates because you're going to see them again. In online group projects are happening in real time. Students have vastly different schedules, so trying to find a meeting time, if that ends up being necessary, can be pretty difficult for students. The instructor can only provide minimal supervision, just because they're not physically present there with the groups and seeing what's going on. And naturally, there's going to be less pressure for groups to be accountable to other group members. Oh, Gracie. Oh, my students feel no shame or pressure to do their part of group projects. They are absolutely unapologetic and shameless. Yeah, I mean, you do have group members like that. And yeah, that is kind of one of the intrinsic kind of drawbacks or challenges with group projects. Also, students are pretty resistant to the idea of group work and group projects, as this kind of cynical comic illustrates. What are group projects supposed to teach you? In theory, it's all about communication, responsibility, collaboration, teamwork, all these great things. What group projects actually taught me? Trust no one. So students can be kind of frustrated, especially those higher achieving students who feel that they're kind of pulling the weight, and there are maybe other group members who are slacking off and just benefiting from their own work. And then naturally, it's also a lot of work for the instructor to try to organize this. Because it does take kind of the conscious effort and intervention of the instructor to make sure that all group members are pulling their own weight, and also to instruct students in how to be a good group member. Because oftentimes in group projects, what students are learning is how to work together as a team, how to share responsibilities, how to delegate, and those are social skills and collaborative skills that don't necessarily come naturally, that they do require some instruction and some practice. So, okay, there's all the reasons why group projects are hard and why we might not want to do them. So are they worth the effort? Why might we want to think about possibly integrating more kind of collaborative learning into online courses specifically? So yesterday I talked a bit about the community of inquiry framework, which proposes that really deep and meaningful educational experiences can only emerge when there's three kinds of interactions that are happening in a course, specifically in an online course where these are often lacking. So in the first place, we have the interaction between the student and the content. We think that's generally the most important. Of course, we want the student interacting with the content. However, this model proposes that equally important to that is interactions between the student and the instructor, and interactions between classmates as being equally important to promoting those meaningful educational experiences for students being able to feel safe, sharing in discussions, and sharing ideas, working together in discussions, and so forth. The research kind of in that line of thinking, following that model, also tends to suggest that collaborative learning is beneficial for students generally, in person or online, and that it can help students learn how to plan and manage time, refine understanding, give and receive feedback effectively and constructively, develop those communication skills, those small group work skills, such as delegating roles and responsibilities, sharing and listening to diverse perspectives in a respectful way, and holding others accountable, and of course building community with others, something in the online environment especially there are fewer opportunities to do. An additional kind of consideration to think about, why might we think about doing a group project or collaborative projects is I would say it's not a great idea for it. It's not going to work for every discipline or every course. I would say group projects are really only worth it if your course objectives or the norms of your discipline actually call for collaboration with others. So a couple of people in the chat have mentioned that working with others and working in small groups is just a reality of working life. Collaboration is something that students can very well expect to do in most any career or um, uh, job choice that they might land in. So when you're thinking about that, if you're considering assigning group work, I would think about it. Does it make sense for your discipline? Does it make sense for the typical career trajectory that your students might be on? And then does the project truly call for a collaborative component? Can students still accomplish the same task on their own? So too often we give students an activity, we call it group work, and in reality it's just something that they could probably do on their own. And that's something that can often, I think, lead to that student frustration, instructor frustration, um, and maybe less than ideal results. So I'd say it makes the most sense to integrate some kind of collaborative element into courses, where there's a direct connection to the field or to a career in which students will be expected to regularly collaborate with others in the completion of projects. Especially in the fields of business management, project management, those fields, I think, I know we have some instructors from those fields in the chat, but my sense is that those fields especially lend themselves to a collaborative element, because those are going to be that's going to be expected as a natural part of engaging in business or being a manager, especially being a project manager, or generally working on projects in the world of business. Gracie King also adds healthcare. Yeah, healthcare is highly collaborative, especially if you think about kind of the managerial side of healthcare. STEM, a lot of research in STEM happens collaboratively. Criminal justice, absolutely. Students who are pursuing a career in criminal justice can very well expect to be a part of a team and have to work as a team with others. And communications also comes to mind for me in that the course objectives, that come from communications probably pretty well aligned with working with others, communicating with others, and being able to, adequately express oneself with others. So those are just some examples of fields that where collaborative projects might be beneficial and make sense in terms of how they connect to the course objectives, and as well as what students can expect once they actually enter into the workforce. Not all inclusive. I'm sure there are also some other examples that others are sharing in the chat. So I mentioned we want to think about, if you're thinking about doing a group project, you also, you want to think about your course objectives. You want to kind of think about the career trajectory that students are on. And you also want to think about how do you actually create a project in which that collaborative element actually is meaningful and actually does lead to greater knowledge. You don't want to just assign work that students could just do on their own. There has to be some kind of reason why they're working as a group. So that can be effective, if you're dealing with problems where there's no right answer. So if you want students to delve into debates that are central to your discipline, controversial topics, or engage in complex problem solving, especially with problems like dealing with people or managing people. Those aren't going to have a right answer. And so having a group element can really be helpful. Um, Situations in which there are multiple possible perspectives, like analyzing current events, doing comparisons, or responding to case studies. And then finally, where the process is actually the point. And what I mean by that is situations in which collaboration skills or teamwork are the central point of doing the project, more so than the actual product that the group might produce. Um, and I am so sorry, Gracie. I just noticed your hand is up.
Oh, Anna, I'm just gonna insert an editorial comment.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, this is just my opinion because I love the breakdown and logic you're using here, but I think especially our students need to work on group projects in probably the majority of their classes to learn how to interact with people.
Yeah.
And be good citizens.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see it limited to particular topics of study or careers. Also, I know of very few careers where somebody will be completely isolated and
Right.
working alone.
Yeah.
And learning to communicate, especially with these online classes. Sometimes my students are like, I don't understand why I have to do discussions and groups and blah, blah. And I said, when you're at your job, you're going to be communicating with words over usually computers and internet and through emails. And that's why I stress your English composition classes are absolutely crucial to your success, because if you do not know how to write a sentence, somebody is going to automatically deduct about 100 points from your IQ, whether you're extremely intelligent or not. So anyway,
Absolutely.
I'm just saying, like, group work, in my opinion, is absolutely crucial for them to learn. And a lot of them have not learned that maybe in their past. So anyway,
Absolutely.
that's just my 2 cents.
I wholeheartedly agree, Gracie. And I just mentioned these, this isn't an all-inclusive list. I agree. Pretty much any job, any career, you're going to have to work together with other people. And like you mentioned, like oftentimes that might happen asynchronously. Um, I know in my job, we work together all the time via computers and the internet. We're not necessarily in the same room together. And I imagine that's the case for most of the people in the room here. Um, that's very much an expectation that students can have entering into the workforce. Even if, I don't know, even if they're, for instance, like majoring in computer science or something of that effect. Computer scientists often work together in teams to solve problems or to design products collaboratively. So this isn't an all-inclusive list. I agree that, yeah, pretty much any career or job that you can think of, students can pretty well expect that this is going to be the norm. And, maybe this is a great point in their education to learn how to do that effectively and to do that well, where there is kind of a safe space to fail. Because I think like oftentimes like with group projects and collaborative projects, like, maybe the product that I've had kind of mixed results, to be honest, when I've done group projects myself. The product that they create might not be great, and there might be problems along the way, but maybe that is kind of the point, is to fail, because that happens all the time in the real world as well. There are breakdowns in communication. I think it was Karen Kendrick said earlier that you know there you can expect there to be free riders and high achievers also in the real world of working as well. Um so those are just things to take into consideration. And also with online students who are, if we have students who maybe take mostly online courses or exclusively online courses, we still want them to also have that opportunity to work together in groups and to get used to that. So thanks for sharing, Gracie. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you're saying. Great. So so we've got kind of kind of a sense of the why we might think about doing group projects, why it might be valuable to students. So let's talk a little bit about the how, because that can be kind of complicated logistically. Um, I mentioned that group projects, they're a lot of work for instructors, and that is absolutely true. Um, so, and especially with online, there's a lot of logistical complications to keep in mind. So I just wanted to share with you a couple of strategies and things to think about, if you are thinking about integrating a group project, say, into your online course. So a couple of possible formats you might think about. Again, keeping in mind kind of the limitations of not having in-person meetings, you might have groups work together to put together a recorded presentation teaching the class a particular topic. Give students the opportunity to create and share knowledge and inject that into the course. That doesn't often happen so much in online courses. So it's kind of adding in a flipped classroom element. Audio recordings, you might consider having, say, pairs of students interview one another on a topic and share an audio recording with the class, or interview a career professional, work together to develop a series of questions, and conduct an interview with somebody in their chosen career. Or something like a multi-stage project report, thinking about those kinds of projects that call for complex problem solving. So perhaps responding to some kind of case study or scenario in which students have to develop a report where they're working through, like, thinking about how they might address the problem and then developing a solution in multiple stages. If a large scale project is too much, if it's it seems too intimidating or too difficult to organize for an online course, you might also think about doing more kind of low stakes opportunities for collaboration. So one example, I've done this in person, and it worked pretty well, and I think it could translate well to online as well. Is having weekly discussion leaders, or assigning a pair of students to write the discussion questions for the week and then facilitate the discussion, being responsible for responding to students and pushing the conversation forward. Now, of course, if you want to do that, you might want to be prepared as the instructor to have to take over and post your own discussion questions, should that fall through. But that could be a productive way, again, to kind of add in that flipped classroom element and have students teach one another, take active responsibility for for the learning that's taking place in the course, by having them define what it is they want to discuss with their classmates. So here we come to a couple of tips and strategies if you want to do a group project in online. Online students need adequate time to prepare. So I strongly suggest, if you're wanting to do this, to introduce the project very early, probably in the first week, probably in the syllabus, just so students know what they can expect and know that they will need to think about and prepare for scheduling possible meetings with other students. And because group work can take time, group communication takes time, building group trust takes time, you want to give them adequate time to do that. Provide a schedule for project completion. Ideally with some scaffolded or multi-stage check-ins or intermediate points, especially like if you're wanting to do, say, like a multi-stage project. I would suggest like breaking that down into separate individual submissions, so that you as the instructor can kind of check in and check for knowledge and make sure everything is going okay with the group project. And also it gives students kind of deadlines that they can work towards and make steady progress towards throughout, if this is a semester spanning project, throughout the semester. And then provide instructions and grading criteria up front, because students are going to have a lot of questions about that, especially the grading component. Oftentimes the student frustration with group projects is feeling like they are being graded for the shortcomings of the group versus their own individual efforts. So you want to just clarify exactly how you're going to be evaluating students, and naturally provide instructions on exactly what you are expecting them to do. Create teams intentionally. So I would suggest getting to know your students early on. If you're thinking about, I would suggest actually creating the teams in most cases, um, just because, especially in online, students probably don't know each other, um, and you don't want teams that maybe overrepresented in a particular set of skills or expertise. You don't want a team of all introverts, and you don't want a team of all extroverts. So maybe get to know your students early on as best that you can. One way to do that is through discussion boards. Naturally, have students discuss what role they prefer to take in group projects, how they usually approach those, what their skills and what they're comfortable doing, or through a survey or preference inventory. Keep teams small and odd. So I would say at a minimum, you might want about 3 students in a group minimum. That's because, say one student withdraws from the course or doesn't participate in the project, you'll still have at least 2 students that can carry on. And no more than 5, just because logistically, if students are trying to plan meetings together, that can get really complicated with kind of competing student schedules. And an odd number is good because then if groups have to make a decision, you won't have a kind of even split. So it's possible to get a majority if there's ever a decision to be made. And D2L allows you in the groups tool to have students self-enroll in their own groups. You might have a discussion board where you have students talk about what topic they want to do their project on, or what interest they might have, or what angle they want to go at it from, and have students kind of self-select in that way and naturally kind of form groups based on talking together in discussions. Next, I would say make your purpose clear. So we kind of talked about the why, but you also want to make that why really clear to students. Again, anticipating that some students might, have had some negative experiences in the past with group work and be kind of resistant to it, especially if they're in an online course, and not expecting that kind of assignment. So you want to make it explicit what the connection to your learning objectives are, and structure your project around real world problems. I think if you just be transparent with students about kind of what real world expectations in your field are, that can be really helpful for kind of mitigating student frustration or resistance. Just kind of giving a real world grounding to the project or the activity. Emphasizing, the importance of collaborative skills to their career, their discipline. We talked about this quite a bit. Specific careers is going to make a lot of sense. Pretty much in all careers, it's going to, there's going to be some element of collaboration. And I mean, if you think about it, I didn't even think about this earlier, but pretty much everyone when you go to a job interview, one of the questions they're almost always going to ask, regardless of what the job actually is, how well do you work in a team? What kind of, how do you communicate as a group? How do you work together effectively with others? Do you have any examples of a time that you worked together with others well, or contributed to a group project? So that's something that, students can really, any student can pretty reasonably expect. And here's a pretty good rationale that I happened to find. This is from the University of Wisconsin's healthcare management program. It's a good example, I think, of a good rationale that you could provide to students for why they are doing a group project, especially in an online course where that is certainly not the norm. So they just point out that this is a conscious decision, then that this is a decision that the instructors believe will have real value to students. And here's why. Working closely in teams is an integral part of the health and wellness management profession. It's important that you practice the collaboration skills and methods necessary to work effectively in teams. The research project that you were a part of in this course will offer an opportunity for you to develop or demonstrate your leadership skills. Leadership skills are important in the workplace, even if you do not have a formal job role that includes managing people. And in general, online learners benefit more from group work than learners in face to face classes because the lack of community can otherwise be quite daunting. Um, so it could be just acknowledging that it could be challenging logistically and socially, but there are some pretty real benefits that students can expect to reap from this exercise if they make the most of it. As the instructor, you want to provide support. I'd suggest, sharing some resources on working in groups, introducing, what good group communication looks like. I've linked to some handouts on group work, I think from the University of South Wales that can be useful for sharing with students and getting them acquainted with what effective group work looks like. Provide suggestions for collaborative tools. I'd suggest Google Docs is great for kind of asynchronous work on a single document. They could use SharePoint. They do have a student SharePoint, and that's what we use at NSCC. Just keep in mind, though, that students, if they're working in SharePoint, they want to share what they're working on with you. They might have some challenges with that. They'll have to download that and send that to you as an actual document, just because the instructor SharePoint, student SharePoint don't talk to each other. So just keep that in mind. Be available to help, of course, and don't just wait for students to ask for help either. Check in with groups periodically and monitor any group discussion spaces that you have. I alluded to this earlier, but build in checkpoints. If you've got a large project, try to break it down into multiple stages where there are intermediate deadlines so that students can kind of more easily digest each stage of the project and have kind of a pathway towards completion that they can kind of meaningfully work towards. Also helps you because it gives you multiple opportunities to kind of formatively assess students and to check in and see how the groups are doing. Especially if you build in kind of opportunities with each stage of that project for them to reflect on things or how things are doing, it gives you more information and the ability to address issues earlier on before they become really problematic. Have students define their roles. So have students create their own job descriptions, and have everyone in the group have a dedicated, specifically defined role. So maybe they elect to have one person be a project manager, one person be, say, like the reporter who reports the findings of the group, the secretary who takes notes, and have students define what the responsibilities of each of those roles will be as in relationship to the larger project. Build in accountability. This is often where things go south with group projects, is a lack of trust and a lack of accountability. So for this, when you're thinking about having students define their own roles and responsibilities, a group contract might be a useful document for having that actually written down and on paper, so that students know exactly what their roles and their responsibilities are and what the consequences are if they fail to fulfill those responsibilities. If they have a project manager, kind of a liaison role, maybe that person can report progress to the instructor. The group contract is a great space also for them to get together and think about what their communication or meeting plan is. Are they going to try to meet on Zoom regularly? Are they going to communicate asynchronously? And that also, just challenges them to, or forces them to talk about, what their scheduling needs are and when it is that they can actually meet and commit to that time. And then finally, peer and self-evaluation. That's probably the most important way to enforce accountability of all group members. Essentially, what a peer evaluation is when students turn in a part of the assignment or the final assignment, they have to rate and review how their other group members did and what their other group members contributed. They also have to evaluate themselves and reflect on what it is that they contributed. So that is, again, just another window into how groups are holding one another accountable, what's going well, where there are maybe, if there are any kind of interpersonal issues going on. It's also, it's also helpful to have that, because just knowing students just knowing that they're going to be evaluated by their peers at the end, that and that's going to factor into a part of their grade, that can help keep them engaged, when those who might be tempted to drift or stray, or just rely on the efforts of others. Provide social support. So, I mean, if you're wanting a strong collaborative aspect of your course, encourage social interaction throughout the course, not just in groups. So encourage sharing of contact information, have an introductory discussion where students can get to know each other. So that, if once you introduce a project, it's not just totally alien and surprising to them, and it seems a bit less daunting. They do have some kind of sense of who the other people in the class are. And if needed, you could even possibly preside over that if they're going to have an initial Zoom meeting. Facilitate that yourself as the instructor. And another sticky point, fair evaluation strategies. You'll want to think about how you want to do this, because you could either assign students individual grades, so every student gets an individual grade based on what they contributed to the group, or you could do a single group grade. And there are pros, or you could do both. You could have a single group grade and then also individual grades, from which you could deduct points if there are issues with participation. So there are pros and cons to each of those approaches. So you just want to think about what makes sense for you, and what makes sense for the project. The other thing to think about is, what are you really grading or evaluating? What's more important to you? Is it the process? Is it seeing students demonstrate leadership skills, teamwork skills, effective communication skills? Or is the product itself more important? Or do you want kind of a balance between those two things? So just things to consider as you're thinking about how you would evaluate any group project. Okay. So I promised we would talk about the groups tool. So we're going to briefly move into a demonstration of that. That's the main place where we can provide a collaborative space for students, is by setting up groups and group discussions in D2L. So I'm going to switch over to D2L and just quickly give us a little introduction to that for those of us who are not familiar. And I think that's going to be the case for most of us here. Okay. So everyone can see D2L, right? Okay. So the groups tool, it's a bit hidden. It's inside of Edit Course. Under Learner Management, there's groups. If you want to create a new group, we're going to click on New Category. And we'll just call this Group Project 1. And then the main choice you're going to have to make here is how exactly you want those groups to be constituted. So you got 3 enrollment options, essentially. So enrollment meaning how you're going to divide students into groups. You can either do it manually. That's what no auto enrollments means. That means that you choose the number of groups and you also choose who is in which group. You manually assign the groups. You could also have it auto assign groups. If you have, in your options here are either you have groups of numbers, say groups of 3, or you have a number of groups, and then you have D2L automatically randomly assign students to those groups. Or you could set up self-enrollment groups where students have the choice of which group they would like to join. And again, you have some options of how you want each of those groups to be set up. Number of groups, capacity of number, that just means, so in this training course, I have 12 students. That's pretty easy. That's 4 groups of 3. So that's exactly what that would allow you to set up. So for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to manually enroll students, since that requires probably the most instructor effort. Cassidy Schmidt.
Quick question for where they can join their own group. Is there a way to set a cap so that, like, not 5 students try to join like one group or one topic,
Yes. Yeah, that's the number of groups, capacity of number option. So
Okay, so
that would be
one.
where you have, say, 4 groups, capacity of 3. So no more than 3 students can join each group.
Okay,
Once it hits 3, no more can join.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking that. That's a good question. I'm sorry I wasn't clear when I mentioned that. So we'll do number of groups, no auto enrollments. Let's say we got 4 groups. Have as many groups as you want. You can restrict enrollments to previous groups. Probably not going to do that. We'll just skip that one. You can make the category and group descriptions visible to group members. So the description is up here. So if you just want to provide a description so students know exactly what group it is that they have joined. So like, let's say group 1 is, let's pretend, say like this is anatomy and physiology, and they're going to do a project where they introduce, say, a particular disease to the rest of the course. So they're going to do, I don't know, heart disease. Group 2 does a different disease, so on and so forth. So this just lets them know what group this is and what the overarching topic is. Make that visible to them. Then you have the option to set up discussion areas. This is probably the most useful part of this, where groups can have their own kind of discussion space separate from the rest of the class, where they can just talk to each other. You can still see it, but they can just talk to each other. So your options here, you can either create a new discussion topic that is just specific to a particular group, or you can go ahead and do a topic if you already have one existing. I'm just going to create a new one. You can also set up Dropbox folders where where the group can submit a single file. One person from the group anyway submits a single file to this Dropbox folder. A note about this though, if you do the group Dropbox folder, whatever grade you give that Dropbox assignment is going to be the same grade for all the members in the group. You can override that if you don't want to do that. If you do want to, deduct some points from a particular individual, you can override that, but just know that whatever the initial grade is you put in for that assignment Dropbox is going to be the same for all of the group members. So just keep that in mind. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up a discussion area, and I'm going to set up a Dropbox folder associated with this particular group. Save. And it takes a second to create. But in the meantime, we can work on that discussion topic. 2 options here. Create 1 topic per group. If you do that, each group has a separate restricted topic inside of the forum. So you'll see, if you look at the discussion forum, there will be a topic for group 1, for group 2, for group 3, for group 4. Or you can have 1 topic with threads separated by group. So you'll see the forum, group projects, you'll see a topic that's, probably the same name, group project discussion. And then groups will, if say a group member posts a thread to that discussion, only other group members will be able to see it. So this is really kind of an organizational choice. It just depends on, do you want kind of more clearly separated spaces for each group to discuss with one another, or do you want it to all be kind of condensed into a single topic where just different threads are visible to other group members? I kind of lean towards the create 1 topic per group, just because for me, it makes it kind of easier to visually separate them. And I'm going to show you what that looks like so it's clear what I'm talking about in just a second.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yeah.
So at this point, if they're all working on the same problem, but I only want them to be able to have their discussion within their group.
Right.
And not see the other group's threads or discussions, which one am I selecting?
Both of those both of them do essentially the same thing. That's why I said it's kind of essentially an organizational choice. Both of those choices are creating a separate space where students will only be able to see posts by their other group members. So you're creating a discussion space that is group specific. Does that make sense? So you can make a discussion, you know, it's a separate discussion than your normal kind of discussion where everybody can respond.
Okay, because I've already got the discussion out there, which shows the information. But by selecting that item in here, you're saying they can only see their own groups.
Exactly.
Posted.
So we'll come back to creating group Dropbox folders. Let's go ahead and take a look at the discussions because I think that's going to be the main item of interest here. Let's look at what we just made. I'm going to have to reorder it so it comes up to the top. We can all see it. Oh. Well, we'll just use the examples that I already have here. Okay. So this is the distinction that I was talking about. And I mean, this is again, it's just a organizational issue. So right here, this is what it looks like if you create a single topic. This is just one topic in which all of the groups are in here. All 4 groups are in here, but any student who starts a new thread, only their other group members are going to be able to see it. So we got some examples here. So Diana posted to group 1. You can see it because you're the instructor, but from her perspective and from the perspective of her group members, only other group members are going to be able to see her post. Same here. I posted to group 2. The instructor can see it. Only other group members are going to be able to see it from the student side of things. Now, if we go back, this here, where you see how it's broken out into group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. Again, it does functionally the same thing. It's just a different kind of way of organizing it. Only members of group 1 can see this topic. Only members of group 2 can see this topic. Only members of group 3. So it's just a way of, you know, keeping those discussions more separate. Because if you got kind of just separate group threads, they're all going to be in there together if you're looking at it as an instructor. If you want to keep it a little bit more separated, though, then that's kind of why I like having separate topics. This is what I'm talking about. This is where each one has a separate space. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just could never understand what they were seeing before.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's look at what they're seeing. That'll probably clarify this a little bit more. So I'm going to pretend to be me as a student. Thanks so much, Gracie. I realize we are at time, so please feel free to leave if you need to, or stick around if you still have questions or would like to see what we're doing with discussions here. All right, so I'm a student now. I'm going to go to the discussions. So I am in, I think I enrolled myself in group 1 here, or group 2, excuse me. So before we saw both Diana and my post. Here I only see my post because I can only see posts from group 2 in here. So this is what the student sees. The instructor will see everybody's posts, but the student will only see posts from their group. Same thing with the topics. I don't think I'm enrolled in that one, but if you had a separate topic here, and I would only see the topic for group 2 as a student. I would only see the one that I'm enrolled in.
Is that the same case for the Dropboxes too?
It is the same case for the Dropboxes. So if we go to assignment Dropbox, I'm in group 2. This is a self-enrollment group. I'm in a different group in that one. So I would only see the group 2 submission box, and I would only be able to submit to that. So same principle. The instructor can see everything, but the student can only see the Dropbox or the discussion that corresponds to their respective group. As far as adding students to groups, I'll just quickly show you how to do that. So it's very easy. If you go to the groups tool, go to group 1, enroll users, and then you just check the box next to who you want to add to the group. Now, with self-enrollment groups, students can enroll themselves. However, important caveat there, you have to give them a link to the groups tool, because remember, that's an edit course and that's in the teacher section of D2L. So students can't see that unless you give them access to it. Best way to do that is to add, I would suggest adding a link to the nav bar if you're going to be using groups a lot, especially if you're going to be using groups where students enroll themselves. I would add that to the nav bar. You can very easily do that. If you come up to the nav bar, click on those dots, edit this nav bar, and just add a link to the groups section. And I'll show you what it looks like when students need to enroll themselves in a group. So let's be Ralph. So Ralph, mock student, he wants to join a group, goes to groups. View available. So this is confusing because it's going to show the groups he's already in. He's already in group 1. Let's view available groups. And then he can just click group, join group if he wants to join group 2. So there you go. And now it shows that he is in group 2. Thank you, Lana. And thank you for staying with me. So any questions about the groups tool?
Yeah, that's where I ran into problems, was they couldn't self-enroll. They didn't know how to, and I didn't know how to tell them to. So after you went in there and added that, then they said, oh, I can see it now.
Yeah, it's tricky. Gotta add a link somewhere in the course to groups so that they can go and they can add themselves to a group if you're going to do self-enrollment. Okay, any lingering questions? That's the extent of what I had planned for you all today. I'm open to questions. If you thank you for attending. If you do have to leave, I very much appreciate all your wonderful questions and comments in the chat. And I'm also happy to stick around and answer any further questions about group tools, organizing group projects. Here to answer them all. Okay, Howard Doty.
Yeah, totally off subject. I have about 4 or 5 students in my current courses that's already open to them, but not the rest of the class.
Yeah, so that's totally normal. Banner, what happens is Banner enrollment rolls over into D2L periodically leading up to the beginning of the semester. So you might see a couple of students in there, but it just hasn't rolled over the full list yet. That won't happen until usually Friday before classes start. So if you see 0 students or you just see a couple of students, that's totally normal, and you can expect the class list to be full before.
But those students can already be in the course, and that is they can already see it?
No, they cannot. So students don't have access to D2L.
I can email them there under class list.
Yeah, you might be able to send them an email, but they won't be able to see the course. I'm not sure about the email. I guess because that goes to kind of their main D2L area, but they can't access the course until first day of classes.
I've got 2 that have accessed it yesterday and today.
Oh, okay. So did they said they were able to get in?
I haven't emailed them, but you know how you can do progress, and it shows that they have accessed the class.
Oh, so that's interesting. That's not supposed to happen. Send me an email and we can look into that. Because
you got many other things to worry about, but I'll talk to you about it again sometime. It's been going on all along, previous semesters.
Yeah, well, I mean, on our end, we're getting all kinds of emails from students saying, I can't find my spring courses, and I have to tell them it's because they're not open yet. They're not open until first day of classes. But I don't know, yours must, I don't know how yours got in.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions about groups? Or anything else? Oh, someone said they liked the impersonate thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, were you gonna ask about that, Lori?
Yeah, and I was gonna say I saw that, and I saw the comment on that. Is that related to what you said in the previous or earlier in the thing about you could help us see a specific student?
Yeah. So that's I said something about that in the previous workshop, just so you know how you can switch between banner teacher and banner student. So if you view as banner student, just know that's kind of like a generic student. But if you want to see what a specific student is seeing, especially with like the groups thing, so if you want to see what a specific student is seeing when they go to try to self-enroll in a group, just let us know. And that's some instructors can't do that, but we can do that. So, and we can do it for all kinds of reasons, like to test settings, to make sure grades are showing up, make sure quiz submissions are showing up, things like that. We can impersonate a specific student, and see exactly what they're seeing.
So you do that for us. That's not something you can add for us to do.
No, unfortunately, yeah, it's not available to instructors.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, good question, Karen, and thank you for all your input. I know you're probably the main person I'm thinking of, and I think of groups because I know you've experimented quite a bit with them.
Yeah, it's just so hard when you don't know what the other side is seeing, and
I agree.
Sure,
yeah.
Well, that helps me make sure that I've got it set up correctly.
Yeah, I wish everybody. If it were up to me, I would give everybody the impersonate thing. But I think it's like a D2L thing, like just how it sets up the accounts.
Yeah, and it's not only the groups. I've experienced that in other things. So.
Yeah, because like the grade book, especially the grade book looks totally different from the student side as opposed to the instructor side.
Exactly.
If you just switch to banner student, you aren't gonna. I'm not sure what happens, but you can't see what a specific student sees.
Yeah, because I'm not a student, so I can't see. I don't show up. So yeah,
exactly.
Because in there you've got the display settings for the managing view, and then you've got the student view. So I've been trying to keep those the same, so I know they're seeing the same things I am.
Yeah. It's it's especially frustrating with grades, because sometimes things just don't show up like they're supposed to, or if there's like dates set on things, and so if you want to see what a specific student is seeing, that's all to say, just send me an email and I'll send you a screenshot back. I know it's inconvenient, but that's one way to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Shuli.
Yes. Sorry, I don't have a camera on my computer, so you don't see me. I have an unrelated question for now. I saw my D2L. The registration, I think it was 20 students, but there are only few students show on my class list on D2L. Is that something that normal?
Yeah, that's normal. That's what I was saying just a minute ago. That the complete, like the full class list with all of the students won't show up until around like the Friday before classes start.
Okay, so for now, few students is normal.
Yeah, it's normal. It's normal.
Thank you. I think I missed it. I was trying to find.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
You're welcome. Thank you. You still here, Hannah?
I don't have camera on my computer, Anna. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, no worries.
My computer is very old. I need a headphone and no camera at all.
Oh no, that's totally fine. That's
okay.
Totally fine.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.